I never planned on faking my own funeral. But when you get pushed out of your own family, when your calls go unanswered for 12 straight months, when your messages get left on scene, you start to wonder if you're even alive to them anymore. So I decided to test it, not out of revenge.
Not out of anger, but out of something far more painful, desperation. My house went quiet. My phone stayed silent. And with one signed document and one carefully worded announcement, I disappeared. It only took 3 hours for the news to spread. By sunrise, cars lined up the street. People I hadn't heard from in a year suddenly showed up in their best black clothes. My children, the same ones who couldn't give me 5 minutes all year, were suddenly crying outside my door, begging to see me one last time. Funny how death finally made me important again. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I was watching everything, listening to every conversation, and waiting for the truth to show itself. And trust me, what I heard at my own funeral changed everything. Now let me tell you the full story. My name is Margaret Holloway, and I turned 72 last winter. You'd think that by this age, life would be calm, peaceful mornings, weekly calls from kids, holidays with grandkids running around the house. But instead, I lived in a quiet home with quiet rooms and a phone that stayed quiet no matter how many times I checked it. My daughter Emily, my son Andrew, even my younger brother Mark, each one once promised me I would never be alone. Words are easy. Promises are easy. But effort? That's the hard part. And nobody had effort for me anymore. The first few weeks after my husband passed, they checked in. A text here, a call there. Then life got busy. At least, that's the excuse they loved. I used to call Emily every Sunday. She used to pick up on the first ring. But this past year, straight to voicemail. I left her hundreds of messages. Some long, some short, some just me saying, "Hi sweetheart, just checking on you." She never returned a single one. Andrew wasn't any better. He always said he was in a meeting, driving, or would call later. He never did. I kept telling myself they loved me, they were just busy, it wasn't personal. But after a year of silence, after 12 months of birthdays, holidays, and doctor visits where no one showed, it started feeling very personal. Nobody warned you what loneliness feels like at 72. It's not quiet. It's loud, painfully loud. You hear the floor creak and hope someone is finally visiting. You prepare extra dinner just in case. You sit near the phone at night, waiting for it to ring. You listen to old voicemails so you can pretend someone still cares. People think loneliness is sad. No, it's humiliating. It makes you question your worth. It makes you feel invisible. And after a year of being invisible, something inside me cracked. The breaking moment came on a Thursday morning in June. I had just come back from the doctor, diagnosed with mild heart arrhythmia. Nothing dangerous, but serious enough to need monitoring. I called Emily. No answer. I called Andrew. Straight to voicemail. I even called my brother, nothing. I sat at my kitchen table and cried like a child. The kind of cry that shakes your whole body. The kind that comes from a place you didn't even know existed. And that day, for the first time, I asked myself if I died right now, would anyone even care? That question haunted me. Until finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't plan the funeral idea seriously at first. I joked to my neighbor, Mrs. Larson, if I died, my kids would probably find out from Facebook. She chuckled and said, "Honestly, Margaret, Maybe that would finally get their attention. That night, I couldn't sleep. What if I did pretend to die? What if I staged a memorial service? What if I made them face what life would look like without me, while I was still alive to see it? Was it dramatic? Yes. Crazy? Maybe. Petty? Definitely. But after a year of being ignored, I didn't care. One evening, I baked lemon cookies, Emily's favorite. I packed them neatly and wrote a note. Thought you'd enjoy these. Love, Mom. I drove to her house. When I arrived, I saw her through the window, laughing, drinking wine with friends. She looked so happy. Happy enough to forget I existed. I rang the bell. She looked at the door, then ignored it. I waited 10 minutes. She never came. I left the cookies at the door and walked back to my car with tears running down my face. That was the final straw. That night, I made the decision. I contacted an old funeral home run by a gentle man named Mr. Jenkins. I didn't need a casket or a body. I just needed a service, a date, a time, a chance to see the truth. I told him everything, every detail of my loneliness. He listened and said, "Ma'am, I've seen families show up for bodies they ignored for years. If you want to know what they really feel, this will do it." He didn't judge me. He understood. Within an hour, it was arranged. Then I sent one message. With deep sadness, we announce the peaceful passing of Margaret Holloway. No details. No explanation. Just enough to spread. I sent it to one person, my sister-in-law. Within 2 hours, my phone exploded with calls and messages. People who ignored me all year suddenly had time. I didn't answer any of them. By the next morning, the entire family knew. And for the first time in a year, they remembered I existed. The day of the funeral, I arrived early through a back entrance. There was a private room with a one-way glass window. I could see them, but they couldn't see me. At 11 sharp, they started arriving. My children, my brother, my sister-in-law, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Every seat filled. People whispered. Emily walked in with mascara already smeared. Andrew paced nervously. But the moment that surprised me most was seeing my granddaughter walk in holding a lily and crying. The same granddaughter who hadn't returned a single message from me. Suddenly, she had endless emotion. Just as the service began, I overheard a whisper through the speaker. Emily leaned toward Andrew and quietly asked, "Do you think she left us anything?" Anything. Meaning money. Property. Inheritance. They weren't crying because they missed me. They were crying because they wanted something. And at that moment, my heart didn't break. It hardened. I leaned back and whispered to myself, "Good. Now I know the truth." The room grew heavier as more people arrived, whispering to each other like a hive of bees disturbed from their sleep. Some hugged, some wiped their eyes dramatically, some stared at the floor as if reflecting on deep memories. I knew better. Most of them hadn't spoken to me in months, some in years. Yet here they were, suddenly heartbroken, suddenly sentimental, suddenly full of regrets that never existed before today. Watching them from the other side of the glass felt unreal, like I was witnessing my own life from a distance I never wanted. I leaned closer to hear them better. A cousin I barely recognized was telling someone, "Yeah, we meant to visit her last Christmas. Things just got busy." Busy. That word had become a knife to me. They were always busy, too busy to call, too busy to visit, too busy to care. but not too busy to show up when they thought I was gone forever. Grief makes people look noble, but guilt makes them show up in black clothing. Then I saw Emily sit down in the front row, her shoulders shaking as if she was genuinely heartbroken. For a moment, I felt a sting of emotion. Maybe she did care. Maybe she regretted the distance. Maybe she realized how deeply she'd hurt me. But then she reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of papers, legal documents. She whispered to the woman next to her, "The house is worth over 400,000. If the will is the same as Dad's, we might split everything equally." My breath caught. Even in mourning, she was calculating numbers. Her tears weren't for me. Her tears were for the life she imagined she'd inherit. I watched the papers tremble slightly in her hands, not from sadness, but from the excitement of what she believed she was about to gain. And I realized I wasn't watching a grieving daughter. I was watching a woman who saw an opportunity she'd been waiting for. Andrew arrived late. He came in like he always did, rushed, distracted, slightly annoyed, acting like the world owed him something. He hugged Emily, said something about traffic, then scanned the room like he was checking attendance. He didn't look sad. He didn't look shaken. He looked irritated, like my death had disrupted his schedule. He sat on the opposite side of the front row and whispered loudly, "Do you think she left her bank accounts organized?" She was terrible at managing things. I couldn't help but smirk. My bank accounts were immaculate. I had organized everything precisely because I knew someday my children would act like scavengers searching for leftovers. I had never wanted to believe it, but here I was watching them prove it. The funeral director, Mr. Jenkins, finally stepped to the podium. "Thank you all for being here to honor the life of Margaret Holloway," he began, with a calm voice that somehow softened the tension in the room. "We will begin with a moment of silence." The room went quiet, though the silence felt fake, forced, like everyone was trying too hard to look emotional. I scanned the faces. Some were genuinely sad. My neighbor, Mrs. Larson, dabbed her eyes softly. She had visited me more in the last 6 months than my children had in a year. She had brought me soup when I was sick, shoveled my snow in the winter, and listened when I needed to talk. She looked more heartbroken than my own family. A few real friends appeared too, quiet, respectful, mourning not because they wanted something from me, but because they truly believed they'd lost me. Seeing them hurt. It hurt more than anything Emily or Andrew could ever do. These were the people who deserved my love, my time, my appreciation. And yet I had spent so much of my life pouring myself into a family that now sat in the front row for all the wrong reasons. Mr. Jenkins continued speaking, sharing a few small details about my life. He talked about my love for gardening, my years working as a school librarian, my compassion for stray animals. People nodded quietly, pretending to remember. Emily dabbed her eyes again, but the moment Mr. Jenkins mentioned the house, she stopped crying. Her eyes sharpened. Andrew sat straighter. Even distant relatives turned their heads slightly when they heard the word estate. It was unbelievable how predictable human behavior could be. The service moved on to open reflections, where family members could share their memories. Emily was the first to stand. She walked to the front with the slow, sad steps of a woman who wanted the room to see her pain. She took a deep breath and began, "My mom was complicated." I almost laughed. Complicated? That was her opening? She was loving, but she could be stubborn. And she sometimes pushed people away without realizing it. She sniffed dramatically, wiping away a tear that wasn't completely real. But she had a big heart, and even if she didn't always show it, she paused, letting her voice crack for effect. We know she tried her best. If I had been standing there, I would have asked her when I ever pushed her away. All I did was beg for a little attention, a phone call, a visit. But in front of an audience, she was rewriting history. People do that at funerals. They make themselves the heroes in stories where they caused most of the pain. Andrew went next. He cleared his throat like he was about to give a business presentation. Mom and I had our differences. That was the understatement of the century. But she taught me responsibility. She taught me to be strong. And even though we didn't always agree, I always respected her. He paused, scanned the crowd, and added, "Family is everything, you know." I nearly choked on air. This man hadn't answered my calls in months, and now he was preaching about family values. It was almost comedic. I watched the reactions of people sitting behind him. Some nodded sympathetically, but a few rolled their eyes. Not everyone was fooled. Some of them knew the truth. But what struck me most was when my granddaughter, little Lily, now 17, stepped forward. She walked slowly, nervously, gripping the lily she brought. She wasn't performing like the others. She wasn't pretending. Her voice trembled as she said, "Grandma was always there for me when I was little. She made me pancakes shaped like animals. She read me stories at night. And I know I haven't been around, but..." Her voice cracked, and tears spilled down her cheeks. I loved her. I really did. My heart softened. She wasn't acting. She was hurting. She wasn't part of the decisions her parents made, the priorities they chose, or the excuses they hid behind. She was just a kid who had gotten swept up in her parents' distance. Her heartbreak was the only genuine grief in the room. When she sat down, Emily put her arm around her, comforting her. But even in that moment, I saw Emily glance down at the stack of documents in her lap, her thumb tapping anxiously against the paper. Grief didn't stop her ambition. As the service went on, people whispered quietly among themselves. I heard fragments. Do we know the details of the will? Was she still of sound mind? I wonder who's getting the house. She didn't have debts, right? Every whisper felt like a needle, poking through the thin fabric of my patience. Then something unexpected happened. My brother Mark stood. He didn't walk to the front. He simply rose from his seat and spoke from where he stood, his voice steady but filled with something real. Margaret was a good sister, he said. She had a big heart. And I'll tell you all something none of you might want to hear. She deserved better. The room shifted. People turned to look at him. Emily frowned deeply. Andrew stiffened. Mark continued, "She reached out to many of you. She asked for your company, your time, your help. And too many of you didn't show up. Including me." His voice softened, and he looked down at the floor. "We should have done better. We should have loved her better. That's all I want to say." For the first time since the service began, my eyes filled with tears. Real ones. Not for the children who forgot me, but for the one person who finally told the truth. After Mark sat down, the room was quiet, an uncomfortable quiet, the kind that settles on people when they're forced to look at themselves and don't like what they see. A few glanced around, embarrassed. Emily avoided eye contact with everyone. Andrew looked irritated that his image had been disturbed. The service moved toward closing remarks, but I could feel tension building like a storm. Something was going to happen. Something big. I felt it in my bones. And I was right. When the final prayer ended and people began lining up to approach the empty casket, a symbolic gesture, since there was no body, Emily turned to Andrew and whispered sharply, "We need to meet with the lawyer immediately, before anyone else tries to claim something." He nodded, eyes hardening with determination. They weren't even subtle anymore. I leaned forward, my hand against the cool glass, watching them with a mixture of disbelief and clarity. This was my family. This was what they had become. Not my supporters, not my protectors, but vultures circling what they believed was a fresh inheritance. And they had no idea I was alive and watching their every move. The next moment would change everything, because someone unexpected was about to enter the room. Someone who would turn the entire funeral upside down. The morning after my live appearance, I woke up earlier than usual. My phone had over 40 messages, missed calls, voice notes, texts filled with apologies, shock, excuses, and long emotional paragraphs from people who hadn't bothered to reply to me even once in over a year. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. I didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or simply shut the phone off again. The irony was too much. Now they wanted to talk. Now they wanted explanations, closure, comfort. Now they wanted to make sure I was okay. Where was this concern 12 months ago? Where was this energy when I used to call, hoping someone would ask how I was doing? I didn't know what to respond, so I didn't respond at all. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the sun rise slowly over the neighborhood. Everything felt different now, like the weight I had carried in silence for months was finally lifting, even if just a little. Hours later, there was a knock on my door, fast, desperate, the kind that tells you someone isn't leaving until you open. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, all three of them, my son, my daughter, and my granddaughter, stood there looking exhausted, embarrassed, and somehow afraid of me. They stepped in like they were entering a courtroom. My living room suddenly felt small, filled with their guilt hanging like smoke in the air. No one spoke at first, until finally my daughter choked out a whisper. "Why didn't you tell us you were alive?" "We thought." She couldn't even finish the sentence. I didn't soften. Not this time. I looked at them and spoke the truth I had been swallowing for a long time. "You thought I was gone, because that's the only time you bothered to come." My son closed his eyes like the words physically hurt him. My granddaughter wiped tears quietly. They sat down, all three of them, waiting for me to speak. For once, I didn't rush to comfort them. I didn't make excuses for their behavior. I let the silence work. It was my son who broke it. "Mom, we're sorry. All of us. This past year, we got busy, we got distracted, and we didn't realize how long it had been since we called. It wasn't intentional. I didn't raise my voice, but my words cut deeper than anger ever could. Ignoring someone doesn't have to be intentional. Neglect never needs planning. It just happens when someone stops mattering." My granddaughter burst into sobs. She ran to me and held me tight, shaking like she was afraid I'd disappear. "Nana, please don't be mad. I love you. I didn't know. I'm sorry." I held her gently, stroking her hair. I wasn't angry at her. She was still young, still learning life's responsibilities. But my son and daughter, they were old enough to know better. They should have known that a mother doesn't stop needing her children just because she no longer says it out loud. My daughter wiped her face. Mom, why did you fake a funeral? I took a deep breath. I didn't fake anything. I didn't know people thought I was gone. I just stopped calling because I was tired of being the only one trying. I figured, if I didn't matter enough for a phone call, then maybe I didn't matter at all. My son shook his head fiercely. No, Mom. You matter. God, you matter so much. We messed up. Tell us how to fix this. Please. There it was, the question that changed everything. For the first time in a long time, they asked what I needed instead of assuming what they wanted. But I didn't answer right away. I needed honesty, not quick promises. Do you want to fix it because you lost me for a day, or because you realized you were losing me long before that? They exchanged guilty glances. No one had an answer. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. People always panic more about losing someone permanently than losing someone emotionally. And that was exactly what had happened. I walked into the kitchen to refill my tea and gather my thoughts. They followed me like a trio of shadows, afraid to leave my side. When I returned to the living room, my granddaughter spoke first, wiping her tears. Nana, can we start over? Can we make new memories? I don't want to miss any more time with you. I cupped her cheeks gently. Yes, sweetheart. You and we're okay. My son and daughter looked relieved, but I held up my hand. But the two of you, this is not going to be fixed with words. It will take actions. Consistency. Effort. Real effort. Not guilt. They nodded like children being scolded. It wasn't revenge, it was accountability. Finally, for the first time in years, they were listening. We talked for hours after that. They told me everything happening in their lives: work stress, financial problems, health scares, personal issues. Things they never told me because they assumed I would worry. And I shared my loneliness, my health concerns, my quiet days that felt too long, too empty. It wasn't dramatic. It was just honest. And sometimes honesty is the hardest thing in the world. By early evening, my son stood up and said, Mom, we want you to come stay with us for a while. Just until everything feels normal again. I shook my head gently. No, not yet. I need space. And you need time to understand that relationships aren't obligations, they're choices. You choose to show up. You choose to call. You choose to make someone feel valued. They looked disappointed, but they didn't argue. Small steps. That's how healing begins. Before they left, my granddaughter hugged me again. Nana, can I call you tonight? And every night? I promise I won't forget again. I kissed her forehead. I would like that very much. After they left, the house felt quiet again. But this time, it wasn't lonely. Because this time, they walked away with guilt, awareness, and the understanding that they couldn't take me for granted anymore. And I stayed behind with something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. Over my feelings. Over my boundaries. Over my life. The next day, my daughter sent groceries to my door. My son hired someone to clean the yard I had been struggling with. My granddaughter FaceTimed me after school. Small things, yes, but small things are how relationships are rebuilt. Yet something inside me still felt unsettled. Not because I didn't forgive them, but because there was a bigger question I hadn't dared to ask. Why did the rumor of my death spread in the first place? Who started it? And why did no one verify it before showing up to a funeral that didn't exist? That question began to grow in my mind like a shadow. I didn't know it yet, but the answer would reveal a truth far more complicated and far more shocking than I ever imagined. And that truth was coming for me faster than I was ready for. The next morning, I woke up with a strange heaviness in my chest, a feeling I couldn't quite name. Something about all of this still didn't make sense. How does an entire family suddenly believe I'm dead without a single person calling, checking, visiting, or confirming anything? Who decided it was time for my funeral? And why? I sat with those thoughts for a long time, staring at the quiet living room that had been the center of so much drama only a day earlier. Then suddenly my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering, but something told me I needed to. When I picked up, a shaky voice said, "Hi, is this Margaret?" I froze. Hardly anyone used my full name anymore. Only my oldest friend, Helen, used to call me that. And the voice sounded like hers. Only older. More fragile. "Helen," I whispered. The line went silent for a second, and then she cried out, "Oh, thank God. You're alive." My heart dropped. "Helen, what are you talking about?" She sniffled loudly. "Your daughter. She told everyone you passed away. She said you didn't want a funeral, only a small gathering. She even said you left a letter explaining it." I felt the room spin. My daughter? The same daughter who sat crying in my living room, begging for forgiveness? I felt my grip tighten on the phone. "Helen, when did she tell you this?" Helen sighed shakily. 8 months ago. She visited the church group and broke down crying. Said she lost her mother and didn't know how to cope. People brought her food, sent condolences, prayed for you. We even held a little memorial. I felt something inside me crack, something deep. 8 months ago? I repeated. My voice trembled. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Helen whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to reach you. I even asked your daughter if I could come to your house, but she said you'd already, been taken care of." My blood ran cold. My daughter didn't misunderstand. She didn't mishear anything. She told people I was dead. For 8 months. And she never corrected it. Not even when she saw me alive yesterday. Why would she do that? What did she get out of pretending I was gone? I thanked Helen in a weak voice and hung up, hands shaking. My mind raced between shock, betrayal, and a fear I hadn't felt in years. Was it money? Was she after something? Had she filed something in my name? Something legal? Something dangerous? That fear pushed me into action. I grabbed my bag, my coat, and walked straight to the town records office. My instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. And I was correct. Horrifyingly correct. When I asked the clerk if there had been any recent activity under my name, she clicked around her screen, glanced at me, then froze. "Ma'am, it shows that your house was transferred to your daughter 3 months ago." I felt my breath leave my body. Transferred? How? She turned the screen slightly toward me. "A deed transfer signed by you. With your signature. It's all official." I stared at the screen. My signature was there. My name. My handwriting. Except it wasn't mine. My hands don't shake like that. My loops aren't crooked. Whoever forged it didn't know me well enough. But they knew enough to steal everything I had. My daughter had declared me dead socially, so no one would question a document transferring my home. My home. The only place I had left. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I needed answers. Immediately. And I knew exactly where to get them. I went straight to my daughter's house. She opened the door with a forced smile, like she was pretending yesterday fixed everything. But when she saw my face, her smile died instantly. Mom? What's wrong? I pushed past her gently but firmly, stepping into the living room. Sit down, I said quietly. She blinked. Mom, sit down. She sat. Not because she wanted to, but because she sensed something had shifted in me. Something she wasn't ready for. I stood in front of her, holding the printed deed transfer papers in my hand. Do you want to explain, I said slowly, why my house is legally under your name? Her face drained of color so fast it was almost frightening. Mom, wait. I can explain. Then explain, I whispered. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, searching for words that wouldn't make her look guilty. But guilt was already written all over her face. Mom. I was in debt, she finally choked out. A lot of debt. Medical bills, credit cards, everything piled up. I didn't know what to do. I stared at her in disbelief. So you stole my home? I didn't steal it, she cried. I just borrowed it. The bank needed collateral, or they were going to take everything. I planned to fix it. I planned to tell you. I just needed you to not be around, not notice. My stomach twisted. So you told people I was dead. She started crying hard now, shaking her head wildly. No, I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just told a few people I was dealing with loss. I didn't say you died. I just didn't correct them when they assumed it. And then it spread, and I panicked. I didn't know how to fix it without looking like a liar. A liar, I repeated. That's your biggest concern? Not that you erased me from my own life. She sobbed harder. Mom, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I looked at her silently. For a long time. And in that silence, something irreversible happened in my heart. I realized I loved her, but I couldn't trust her. Not with my home. Not with my life. Not with anything. My son arrived minutes later after she called him, crying hysterically. He tried defending her, but I shut him down. Don't. She didn't just forget me. She replaced me. She erased me. She stole from me. And she expected I would never find out. He covered his face with his hands, overwhelmed. I took a deep breath. Tomorrow morning, both of you will come with me to the courthouse. You will sign the house back over to me. And then, we will decide if you belong in my life or not. Not the other way around. My daughter looked crushed, but she nodded through tears. Okay, Mom, okay. I turned to leave. My son grabbed my arm gently. Mom, will you ever forgive us? I looked at him, then at her. Forgiveness isn't the problem. Trust is. And trust takes time. I walked out of their house with my spine straight, my heart steady, and my soul finally awake. For a whole year, they ignored my calls. Then they cried at a funeral that wasn't even real. But life has a strange way of revealing the truth. And now they knew the truth about me. I wasn't weak. I wasn't disposable. And I wasn't someone they could erase just because it was convenient. I was alive. And I was done being invisible. And this time, they would have to earn their way back into my life, one honest day at a time.